Nestled deep within Canada's Northwest Territories lies a valley of breathtaking beauty, a place that cannot be reached by ordinary means. For decades, countless men have crossed its boundaries in search of the vast treasure rumored to be hidden there. Many have returned empty-handed, but many more have never come back at all. Could there be something far more sinister lurking within the Nahanni Valley? So fasten your seatbelt as we dive into today's mystery. But first, you'll have incredible luck if you like and subscribe before this video ends. Pausing to take his bearings, Lefebvre turned to see how far behind his companions were. As expected, the pair still lagged some distance back, struggling to negotiate the narrow trails that wound between massive boulders. Smiling to himself, he reached into his pack, pulled out a strip of dried bison meat, and continued on his way. The seasoned trapper had now been traveling with the two Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers for 3 days, and so far neither of them had been able to keep pace with him. To say that he took no satisfaction in their discomfort would have been a lie, for Lefebvre harbored little fondness for the officers. Still, it had been a hard year, and though he disliked the police, he accepted their generous payment to escort them, as he had few other choices left. The section of the flat river they needed to reach lay far from the nearest settlement, and very few guides had ever ventured there. From what he had gathered, they were searching for a prospector at the request of his fiancée. The man had apparently failed to appear at his own wedding, and Lefebvre suspected this was more a case of cold feet than a sinister plot. He had not gone much farther when something made him stop in his tracks. Just off the trail lay the badly decomposed body of a lynx caught in a hidden snare. The sight unsettled him. It was rare for anyone to set traps in this remote country and then abandon them. The old trapper stood chewing thoughtfully on his bison meat as the two policemen finally caught up. They showed little interest in the discovery, brushing aside Lefebvre's concerns, and so the journey pressed on. Before long, however, the trapper's unease began to find justification. Along the way they encountered more snares, each one holding the rotting carcass of a lynx or fox, all of them untouched. Lefebvre took no pleasure in watching the officers slowly realize the significance of the abandoned traps, understanding now that their mission looked far more dangerous than when they had first set out. Not long after, they came upon a boat lying half-submerged in the weeds at the river's edge. A quick inspection suggested it had likely been hulled by rocks, but there was no sign of its owner. They were now only a short distance from Irving Creek and their destination, but the pace of the party quickened noticeably. The fate of the cabin was evident before it even came into view, the air ahead thick with the smell of charred wood and musky smoke. Lefebvre hung back, watching as the two policemen drew their weapons and advanced toward the blackened ruins. To him, the real threat seemed more likely to be hidden in the surrounding forest than in the smoldering wreckage. When he finally moved closer, what he saw took him by surprise. The prospectors' supplies lay untouched, stacked neatly in a pile not far from the remains of the cabin. The missing man's body lay nearby, his hunting rifle beside him with its barrel bent grotesquely out of shape, and in one scorched hand he still clutched a revolver. But what chilled Lefebvre most was the missing head. Lefebvre had grown up with grim tales of those who had perished in this valley, and he had no intention of joining their ranks. He told his two clients plainly that he would be heading back to town within the hour, with or without them. No arrest would ever be made for the death of Phil Powers, and sadly, he would not be the last man to meet his end under mysterious circumstances here. To the outside world, this was known as the Nahanni Valley, but to those who had set foot within its borders, it carried a far darker name, the Headless Valley. The Nahanni River Valley holds some of the most spectacular scenery in the Northwest Territories, and is also home to the region's highest peak, Mount Nirvana. Its beauty has earned it the designation of a National Park Reserve, covering a breathtaking 12,000 square miles. The reason its endless forests and mighty waterfalls have remained untouched by modern civilization is simple. The terrain is so unforgiving that the only way in is by helicopter. Those daring enough to gamble everything on a chance at finding gold had no choice but to press deep into the valley, living out of makeshift camps or hastily built cabins. They would vanish for months at a time, and most who returned came back empty-handed despite their toil in the wilderness. But in the year 1904, Frank and Willie McLeod staggered back into the town of Fort Leard laden with heavy bags of gold. The two brothers claimed they had discovered a secret fortune and would soon return to seize it. The following year, after investing their newfound wealth into tools and provisions, they disappeared once again into the valley. As time passed, those they had promised to share their spoils with waited patiently, but the brothers never returned. 3 years after they were last seen, Charlie McLeod led a party into the Nahanni in search of his missing siblings. What they found was the skeletons of both men lying in the ruins of their camp, their heads missing. One of the bodies was still tucked beneath a blanket beside a dead fire, suggesting he had been decapitated as he slept. On the other side of the ashes, his brother's arm was stretched out toward a nearby rifle, the blanket cast aside as though he had leapt up to fight off his own death. 10 years later, another search party pushed into the valley, this time looking for a missing man named Martin Jorgensen. The Swedish prospector was a hardened veteran of the Yukon, having spent decades chasing his fortune across the north. In 1917, Jorgensen sent word to his friend Poole Field in the nearby town of Ross River, claiming he had struck a rich vein. It was the last anyone ever heard from him. The following year, Field discovered Jorgensen dead in his burned-out cabin, his head also missing. 4 years later, 2 prospectors stumbled upon the frozen body of a trapper named John O'Brien. The former soldier had survived the horrors of the Great War, only to meet his fate in the Nahanni. The manner of his death shocked those who found him. O'Brien sat upright, fully clothed, frozen solid beside the smoldering remains of his campfire. It was as if he had been flash frozen in an instant, for in one hand he still clutched a cup of coffee, even though he sat beside flames that still burned. Not long after that discovery, another body was found in a hauntingly familiar location. Yukon Fisher, a notorious troublemaker in the region, had made his home deep in the valley since the year 1912. Those who encountered him described him as a giant of a man. The outlaw had fled civilization after, in a drunken brawl, he slashed a barkeep with a broken glass. Though the injury he inflicted was grave, the victim ultimately survived. But the sheer amount of blood lost convinced Fisher he had killed the man. Even when passing travelers assured him he was no murderer, Fisher refused to return to society. He survived by raiding prospector camps and stealing from the snares of local hunters, and then he simply vanished from existence. In 1927, the skeleton of a tall man was discovered lying in the undergrowth near Bennett Creek, only a few yards from where the McLeod brothers had been slain. Beside it lay a rifle, its barrel inexplicably bent, and the charred remnants of a shelter. In 1927, the skeleton of a tall man was discovered in the undergrowth near Bennett Creek, only a few yards from where the McLeod brothers had met their fate. Beside him lay a rifle with its barrel inexplicably bent, along with the charred remains of a cabin. As unsettling as the murders committed in the Nahanni Valley were, they were matched in horror by the many mysterious disappearances of travelers who passed through this land. The circumstances of their vanishings were every bit as baffling as the grisly condition in which so many of the valley's victims were found. In 1926, May Lafferty joined a hunting party bound for the Headless Valley. Somehow, she became separated from the group. Despite repeated search efforts, no trace of her was ever found until several months later, when a native hunter named Big Charlie claimed to have seen a woman matching her description. According to him, while traveling through the valley, he spotted a figure scrambling up a rock face. She was naked, visibly distressed, as if fleeing from someone or something. When asked who he believed her pursuer might have been, Charlie said he dared not intervene, for he believed it to be the devil himself. Lafferty's remains were never recovered, and at the time she vanished, she had been close to the Flat River. 2 years later, another party moving along the same stretch of water also lost one of their number. Angus Hall, known to friends as hot-tempered and impulsive, grew impatient when his companions refused to quicken their pace. Determined to be the first to find a hidden vein of gold, he stormed ahead alone. The others allowed him to go, knowing it was pointless to argue, and followed the trail of his boot prints. But only a few yards further on, those prints suddenly ended mid-stride. All that remained of Angus Hall was one final muddy impression, as if he had been lifted bodily from the ground while walking. By 1936, 2 more prospectors had disappeared. Bill Eppier and his partner Joe Mulholland had spent years scouring the Nahanni Valley in search of fortune. The burned-out ruins of their log cabin were discovered on the shores of Glacier Lake, but their bodies were nowhere to be found and have never been recovered. As with the killing of Phil Powers in 1931, no arrests were ever made for the murders within the valley. When asked who they believed responsible, the local Dene people placed the blame on a mysterious and ancient tribe. The Naha were said to have been the original inhabitants of the Nahanni Valley, yet they shunned contact with other peoples. Their very name translated to "the people over there," a reference to the distance they always kept from their neighbors. They were believed to possess powers that bordered on the supernatural. Naha warriors were described as towering in stature, immensely strong, and hiding their faces behind terrifying masks. Legend holds that the tribe died out centuries ago. But unlike other societies, they left behind no villages or structures. They simply vanished into the mist. The Dene maintained that the Naha decapitated trespassers as a warning, and that the killings were the work of their descendants. In 1945, reports surfaced of a miner named Ernest Savard, who had been found dead in the Nahanni Valley. The man from Ontario was discovered lying in his sleeping bag, his head severed from his shoulders and propped upon a nearby rock. As recently as 1983, a hiker in Glacier Bay, Canada, stumbled across the belongings of a missing prospector. The witness later claimed he heard ghostly moans echoing from the undergrowth before glimpsing a mysterious masked figure approaching. Terrified, he fled without looking back. The murders of prospectors in this region bear an unsettling resemblance to the killings that have taken place in Arizona's Superstition Mountains. There, too, whispers persist of a mysterious force said to guard a hidden cache of gold, the Lost Dutchman mine. Many of the victims found in that unforgiving landscape were also discovered without their heads. Stranger theories have been put forward to explain the bloodshed in the Nahanni. Carvings on nearby rock faces depict creatures resembling mammoths, and archaeological digs have uncovered their ancient bones. Could it be possible that some prehistoric beasts have managed to endure in this isolated place? One such creature, spoken of by the Dene, is called the Wahila. According to descriptions in their accounts, it was an amphibian, a monstrous hybrid of bear and wolf. It was said to crush its prey with powerful arms before feasting on the remains. Some believe the Wahila may in fact be a descendant of the dire wolf, the massive predator thought to have vanished long ago. There are also tales of strange beings known as the Nuknuks, hair-covered humanoids wielding crude clubs. The history of the valley records numerous reports of UFO sightings as well, adding yet another supernatural layer to the mystery of its many deaths. Much like the legend of the Lost Dutchman mine, it would seem that some hidden force is determined to thwart all who would dare to strip gold from the earth beneath North America. And whether the killers are otherworldly or all too human, they continue to strike from the shadows, beyond the reach of detection. So if one day you find yourself tempted by the lure of fabled treasure in the untouched wilderness of this continent, remember the fate of those who came before. Do not allow yourself to become the next victim of the Headless Valley. And that is the story for today. Thank you for watching until the very end. If you enjoy videos like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel so that you receive a notification each time we release a new one.